When we look at a binary compound and we note that both of the elements in it come from the right-hand side of the periodic table in the nonmetals region, these elements, having very similar electronegativities, will form more of a sharing relationship with the electrons and a covalent bond. And it is covalently bonded substances that we correctly term as being molecular. When we name these compounds, the subscripts are indicated through the use of prefixes that are used in front of the two component elements names. And other than the prefixes, the naming of the molecular compounds is very similar to how binary ionic compounds are named. You have the initial element, the first element, named with no change to its name made, and then the second element is named but its ending is changed to IDE. Now the prefixes that we use are pretty standard numerical prefixes: mono for 1, di for 2, tri for 3, tetra for 4, penta for 5. 6 through 10 would be hexa, hepta, octa, nona, and deca. Now, some of the things to keep in mind when using these prefixes: there are a couple of exceptions, or a couple of times where we make some modifications to using these prefixes. The first is with the first atom only. If there's only one of them, the prefix mono is not used. The element is just named as it is by itself without the prefix mono. The second atom always has a prefix used, whether it's mono, di, tri, whatever it might be. The second caveat to naming with molecular compounds is that for elements where when you put the prefix onto the element's name you end up with an OO or an AO combination, like monooxide or tetraoxide or pentaoxide, conventionally we drop the first vowel. So monooxide becomes monoxide. Tetraoxide becomes tetroxide. Pentaoxide becomes pentoxide. It just kind of is a little bit easier on the pronunciation. So in looking at these 4 examples here, we see that we have 1 carbon and 2 oxygens. So because the carbon is the first atom and it would ordinarily get the prefix mono, the first atom never gets the prefix mono associated with it. So we would just name it carbon. 2 oxygens, the prefix for 2 is di, so we would name this dioxide, still changing the ending of the second atom to IDE. CCl4, again, only 1 carbon, so we just name it carbon. Prefix for 4 is tetra, so we would name this carbon tetrachloride. Notice the tetrachloride is all one word, as was dioxide. Now in the next one, P2O5, now the first atom does have a subscript, so we will put a prefix in front of it because it's not the prefix mono. And so P2O5 would be diphosphorus pentoxide. And notice again, with the prefix for 5, penta, we drop the A and it's just pentoxide. In the last one, SiSe2, silicon is actually a metalloid rather than a nonmetal, and that's fine, that's acceptable. Molecular compounds typically are going to be between 2 nonmetals or sometimes a metalloid and a nonmetal. But SiSe2 would be silicon, no mono in front of it, diselenide. Selenium would become selenide. Unfortunately, there's not a real rhyme or reason to how many letters get dropped at the end of the element's name and replaced with IDE. Before continuing, please pause the presentation and complete the examples on this slide, and then restart the presentation to check your work.